Good morning and welcome everyone. It's good to see you all here again. And this is the fourth WISE session. And I'm very honored to introduce our guest speaker to you today. Dr. Pushpinder G. Bhatia is a Fulbright Nehru Fellow in the and is the principal of Guru Nanak College of Arts, Science and Commerce, which is affiliated to the University of Mumbai. She completed her post-graduation in physics and her doctoral work in magnetic materials for the University of Mumbai. Her postdoctoral work in biophysics is in progress. So she has worked in various capacities and held important positions such as Director, Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Nodal Officer of Community College, Coordinator of STAR Program of DBT. She is on the editorial board of two international journals and is a managing committee member at the National Center for Science Communicators. She has authored over 25 research articles and 2 books. As a PhD supervisor, she guides students in a material research center. She is a strong advocate of developing skill-based vocational programs for undergraduate students. I welcome you again wholeheartedly, ma'am, and it's good to see you here and see all the participants also. Please, over to you for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sonia. And thank you to Dipti for having me here on this virtual platform. Just give me a minute. I'll just share my screen in a minute.
While Pushpinder is sharing her screen, let me tell you something interesting about her. You know, I had the good fortune of meeting her during the Fulbright program, and she's one beautiful example of the Indian woman conquering the international scene. You know, her sarees, her sense of dress up, and sometimes Pushpinder and me would be the only women in the room wearing a sari. That led to a mutual understanding. And this is exactly what WISE is about. The way women transform the spaces around them and the way they interact with those spaces. So I saw this lady in totally Indian attire in a meeting many times. And you know how sometimes in a meeting with many people, one tends to get carried away by how they look and what they wear. But the moment she would open her mouth, my God, everybody had to pay attention. So she is one role model who we are very happy to welcome here. Okay, Pushpinder, I can see you're ready with your presentation. Please
Yes.
go ahead. Welcome to Punjab University, and we hope to welcome you here physically someday.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dipti.
Sorry, my video is off because there were certain technical issues, but
No, that's okay.
for two of us today.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Dipti, for those kind words. And yes, I think it was those days, that we were together. Much to learn from you as well, Dipti. I think it's mutual. So thank you for having me here on this virtual platform. I must thank Sonia for the nice, crisp, and very kind introduction that she has given me. I am glad to be here on this virtual platform of Punjab University, and I was very happy, in fact, to know that you already have a Women in Science group in the university, because there are so many colleges and institutes that are yet to wake up to this whole idea of talking about and glorifying women in science, if I may say that. Well, my topic, the title, of course, is The Rigors and Chills of a Journey in Science. This topic title would sound a little dramatic to some, but let me tell you, a journey in science is quite a roller coaster ride. Whether you are a student, whether you are a career woman in science, the journey is does have its fair share of ups and downs, the rigors and the chills, and science by its very nature as a discipline has a lot of these exciting moments, may I say. Well, I represent Guru Nanak College of Arts, Science and Commerce, which is in fact a 30-year-old college, which is affiliated to the University of Mumbai, and it is located in central Mumbai. We have programs devoted to the sciences, liberal arts, and of course to the commerce streams. We have many applied programs as well. So that's about my college. The image that you can see is the image of my college. Of course, we have a huge playground, which is very rare in a city like Mumbai. And now, before I, begin my presentation, I must congratulate everyone on the World Science Day for Peace and Development, which is being celebrated today. So I think, it's in fact very apt that we talk about women in science. We talk about the journey of science on this day, though of course it was not planned, but I think it's just a very pleasant coincidence that it also happens to be the World Science Day for Peace and Development. And when you talk of peace, I think one can imagine women, and women are so synonymous with peace. I would like to believe that. Well, this is an image which most of us have been exposed to, and I need not speak much about this image except that this was a group of women associated with ISRO who were celebrating the Mangalyaan mission. And this image has, in fact, been very, very symbolic in more ways than one. It has, of course, broken the stereotypes that we had of, grim, serious-looking men who are scientists working in a space research organization. But this image, was publicized, and of course, when it came out, it generated so much of hope for women scientists wherever they were in India, at least. Now, my talk today, my presentation, will be in a story format as we go ahead. I will, of course, speak a little about the women in science in terms of statistics. And I have seen the earlier talks under this banner, and I'm trying not to get repetitive, but I will certainly speak a little about some statistics which will have to be given, because those statistics will make you also appreciate the stories that I'm going to tell you. I will be sharing short stories of 9 women scientists, after which we shall, all sit down and think as to, how we need to work on certain things and work in certain areas, and maybe learn from each other. So I just hope you can all, sit through this whole discussion that we will have in some time. Well, this is, data which was obtained from a paper that I came across in Psychological Science by Gisbert Stock of Leeds University. Well, this image, in fact, shows you, it's a plot of the gender equality ratio versus the women among STEM graduates. So the line that is, the plot can very clearly show you. I don't know if you can see the print on the plot which is there, but if you see towards the lower end of the line to the right, that is, as the women among STEM graduates increases, you will see that there are countries like UAE, Turkey, Algeria, Indonesia, Vietnam, which are supposedly developing countries with huge gender inequality, which is seen otherwise. And as you go to the right, to the left, towards the lower women among STEM graduates, you will see that wherever there is the gender inequality is low, those are the developed countries, so to say, with most of them are from, of course, Europe and the United States of America. And surprisingly, it is seen that women among STEM is less in those countries. So the more gender equal the country, the larger the disparity between boys and girls pursuing science. Now, what could be the reason? Because this is something which is a little surprising. The reason, of course, is that countries which are more gender equal offer opportunities to girls, to all genders, to choose disciplines of their choice. Financial independence is not the only driving force. Whereas in countries which are less gender equal, it is usually observed that girls, especially, go into careers in STEM because that assures them financial independence. So that is one finding which I thought I must share with you today on this platform. Closer home, if you see this plot which is on the screen, this is an All India survey on higher education. It shows that proportion of men and women in several fields and degree programs, again, is a little skewed. Women outnumbered men in MSc and PhD math programs only. Otherwise, the numbers swing in favor of men. Going to the Nobel Prize Awards by gender, if you classify them by gender, we have these two plots for females and males. And you can very clearly see that in chemistry, physics, and physiology, the number of Nobel laureates has been very, very high. In fact, if you see this very clear plot at the bottom of this screen, you will see that there are only 20 women since 1901. Only 20 women have received Nobel Science Prizes compared to 587 men. So that is a very, very skewed, a very, very lopsided ratio. And there have to be reasons for this. There is a UNESCO study. In fact, I would want each one of you to focus on these numbers as I tell them, as I narrate them. A UNESCO report, very recent UNESCO report, says that in undergraduate programs, there are around 53% female students, which is very, very good, which is very encouraging. By the time you go to the master's programs globally, you have around 55% girl students, which drops to 44% when you come to PhD programs, which is again understandable because PhD is again a very super specialized area where you will, of course, you expect numbers to fall down when you go to a PhD degree. But surprisingly, in the job market globally, there are only 29% women, both in the part-time and the full-time sectors of job markets. So this is very, very shocking. I mean, where is the leakage along the way? That is what needs to be looked at. If you have around 55% of women completing their masters or even 44% completing their PhD programs, why is it that only 29% make it to the job market? Where is the leakage? Where is this whole skills pipeline obviously has a leakage somewhere, and we'll try to look into that. At this point, we must, of course, we can't move further without acknowledging Marie Curie, who won 2 Nobel Prizes for physics in 1903, and one for physics and one for chemistry in 1911. In fact, even now, if you ask people about, if you ask anyone about names of a woman scientist, I think Marie Curie would come first on the list, and maybe a couple of other names would cross your mind, and that's it. So that's the kind of visibility that women scientists have. Well, to begin, as I told you, I will be sharing some stories with you. Now, my stories are taken from a book called Leelavati's Daughters, which is about the women scientists of India, which was edited by our own renowned woman scientist of our times, Padma Bhushan Padmashri Rohini Godbole, and Dr. Ram Ramaswamy. This is under the auspices of INSA, that's the Indian National Science Academy. Now, this book termed Leelavati's Daughters. As I told you, it's about the biographies of 98 odd women scientists. Now, this book is named after Leelavati. Who is Leelavati? Well, Leelavati was the daughter of Bhaskaracharya, the renowned 12th century mathematician. Though Leelavati was never married, and she's still known as the first woman student of mathematics in India. And we would like to believe, of course, the editors of Leelavati's Daughters have termed all the women scientists, all the women in science after her as her daughters. So it's only apt that the book be called Leelavati's Daughters. What are the trials and the tribulations that these numerous women have faced? What have been their range of experiences? It is exciting to read this book, and I will pick up a few stories from Leelavati's Daughters to share with you. Of course, I have also picked up some stories from the international science arenas to just give you a flavor of the diversity. And of course, it reassures us that these problems are there universally. It's not just an India-specific problem. So wherever there is an imbalance, wherever there is discrimination, wherever there are roadblocks to women's progress, these have been pretty universal in nature. Now, coming back to Leelavati, the encouraging father, that is Bhaskaracharya, authored an arithmetic text in which he addressed complex problems to his daughter. Leelavati was a very bright girl. Of course, she couldn't pursue it as a career at that time. Probably one never existed. She was very bright and very capable of solving these problems. So there's a quote, "O Leelavati, intelligent girl, if you understand addition and subtraction, tell me the sum of the amounts," and there it goes. So this is a quote by Bhaskaracharya to his daughter. Let me take you through these few short stories. Let us begin with the first Leelavati's daughter, the first among Leelavati's daughters, that is Anandibai Joshi. Please observe and please pay close attention to the dates, to the times in which these wonderful women lived and broke the barriers and shackles that they must have faced. Anandibai Joshi, born in 1865, and she had a very, very short lifespan of barely 22 years. She is the first Indian woman to obtain a medical degree in USA at the age of 22. In fact, the first female physician in India. Well, she was married at the age of 9 to a widower who was 20 years her senior. She was a mother at 14 and she lost her child. That's when she thought that medical facilities and clinical care is something which is just not available. Of course, the British influence was always there in India. And the death of a child proved to be a turning point. That was when she decided to take up studies in medicine. Of course, she had a very encouraging husband. She barely could read Marathi when she was around 15, 16. She picked up English. She sailed to the United States of America at the age of 19. She landed in Philadelphia. I think Dipti will remember Philadelphia. She landed in Philadelphia and she completed a 2-year degree program in medicine. At 21, she completed her medical degree and a medical program. And very tragically, at the age of 22, she died due to tuberculosis. Please also understand that those were the times when women health, not just women health, healthcare itself was very scarcely available. In fact, there was not much research at that time, and those were, of course, very difficult times. And being a woman made it even more challenging. So she died at 22 due to tuberculosis. So this is the first instance of a woman who chose a career in science. Of course, she got back to India and she tried to work, but then the end was very, very quick. And she represents, in fact, there are many movies which have been made in Marathi on Anandibai Joshi. And there is also a crater on Venus which has been named after her. It's called Joshi. So that's about Anandibai Joshi. The next woman scientist is not a Leelavati's daughter, but she's an Austrian physicist. Again, she lived in the early 19th century, 1878 to 1968. Now, Lisa Meitner discovered nuclear fission and was praised as the German Marie Curie by Einstein. So she was, of course, a very, very illustrious scientist. To give you an example, she was working in the nuclear physics lab in Berlin. And she was, since there were only men in the university, she had to work alone in a dark basement in a laboratory and not allowed to use the bathroom facilities in the university. So to avail of bathroom facilities, she had to cross the road and go into and use the bathroom of a restaurant which was there across the road. So this was a challenge which she faced. Of course, when Germany was overtaken by the Nazis, Lisa, being a Jew, had to leave Germany. She settled in Sweden, from where she would share notes with her collaborator, Otto Hahns, because she was part of the team which was working on nuclear fission. Now, though she was sharing her work with Otto Hahns, her work was a part of Otto Hahns' work. When the Nobel Prize was awarded in 1944, she was excluded from the Nobel Prize, and this again was all because there were the reasons which history attribute are one of those reasons, of course, is that she was an advocate of peaceful use of atomic energy, and that probably was one of the reasons that she was ignored. She was very vocal about the use of nuclear energy and nuclear fission for peaceful purposes. Of course, this discovery, this invention of Otto Hahns and his team led to the creation of the atomic bomb, which was, of course, as we all know, how and where it was used. So this was one of the reasons. So again, you have here a woman who has worked very hard, who has broken barriers despite all challenges. She became a part of this path-breaking research work, and of course, who had compassion, who had her own ideas about how science has to be used, and she did pay a price for it. Besides that, if you see, she has been nominated 19 times for the Nobel Prize in Chemistry between 1924 and 48. And 29 times she was part of a team for part of the nominations for the Nobel Prize in Physics. However, she was not awarded a Nobel Prize. The next short story, is about Alice Ball. Now, this was an African-American scientist and the first African-American chemist, in fact, to receive a master's degree. She studied at the University of Hawaii. If you see her lifespan, again, it's a very short lifespan. She developed a groundbreaking treatment for leprosy. At that time, there was an oil which was used for leprosy cure. Of course, it was a topical treatment, but she created an easily injectable oil formulation, which was a path-breaking work. Of course, after that, she died before she could publish the work. Now, once she was no more, her university president attempted to claim her research as his own, and he even marketed the drug under his name. Of course, her earlier former supervisor, Fine and Dean, after some years, they spoke out publicly about this, and eventually February 29th was celebrated as Alice Ball Day. That's all that they could do. Of course, Alice Ball, again here, died very tragically due to chlorine poisoning, due to the exposure which was there in the laboratories. Again, let us also understand here that laboratory facilities were very, very, because science itself was emerging at that time. Despite the science revolution, the facilities that we see today are far, far more superior than the ones that existed then. And even at that time, these women dared and had the audacity to think about studying science or probably taking up careers in science is very, very commendable. Kamala Soni is one of Leelavati's daughters. She lived from 1911 to 1998. In fact, there's a lot of information about Kamala Soni and her career on the net, and of course, even in Leelavati's daughters. She was a biochemist and the first Indian woman to receive a PhD in a scientific discipline. In 1933, she was the first woman to be admitted to the Indian Institute of Science. Now, this admission itself to the Indian Institute of Science has some drama that is attached to it, and a lot of controversy which was attached to it. She applied to the Indian Institute of Science for research in Bengaluru, which is now in Bengaluru. It was earlier called the Tata Institute of Sciences at that time. She applied for a research fellowship, but her application was turned down by the director, Professor C.V. Raman, on grounds that women were not competent enough to pursue research. Kamala had to stage a dharna. She was admitted on a condition that she would not spoil the environment of the lab and not be a distraction, and that she would be a regular student and would also have to work late if needed. Eventually, she was admitted on a probation of 1 year. So that's the kind of treatment, and it is indeed very shocking to know that if a Nobel laureate like Sir C.V. Raman, held such strong views about women in science, it speaks much about the mindsets that existed and probably which still exist in some places. Eventually, of course, she did work as a biochemist. Her work is recognized. She worked on the nutritional benefits of Neera. Now, Neera is an extract of the palm fruit, the palm tree, which is supposed to be very high in nutrition. She worked on the nutritional benefits of it and was awarded by the President of India with the Rashtrapati Award. Let me take you to an Asian scientist, Shen Chung Wu. She had a long, illustrious career as an Asian in the United States. She was a Chinese American physicist. She's often known as Chinese Curie, Chinese Madame Curie. She's known for a revolutionary work disproving the law of conservation of parity. Now, she is one of those few physicists, of course, and theoretical physicists, because theoretical physics is a challenge, and a challenge in its own right. She disproved the basic law of parity, conservation of parity. And in fact, she traveled from China to the US to pursue her studies in science at the university level. Now, when she landed in the US, she wanted to join the University of Michigan as a research student, as a research scholar. But to her utter surprise, she realized and she found and discovered that women were not allowed to use the front entrance at the University of Michigan. So that quite disturbed her, and she decided to choose another university, that was at Berkeley, from where she eventually completed her PhD. She has, of course, in her memoirs, she has written about the gender biases, the gender discrimination that she faced. And in fact, if you read the quote on the slide, I wonder, she asked once, whether tiny atoms in nuclei or mathematical symbols or DNA molecules have any preference for masculine or feminine treatment. So this was one of the statements which was an outburst, against the disparities that existed at that time. Let us now look at Anna Mani, who is our own scientist. She started her work in 1940. She's of course is a Leelavati's daughter. Her biography is there in the book if you wish to read further. In 1940, she signed up to do research work in spectroscopy under C.V. Raman. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, Sir C.V. Raman had quaint notions about scandalous interaction between the sexes at the institute. So she was not accorded a PhD despite publishing 5 single-authored papers in her institute on spectroscopy. She was quite disillusioned and then moved to meteorology because there were no scholarships available in other sciences for her. So she in fact changed her field of interest, her discipline, to meteorology. She went to Imperial College London and completed her program from there. And she is one scientist who did not complete her PhD. Despite that, she is a widely published scientist, and she transcended the limited cultural spaces that were available to her. And she just did science and pursued science for the passion of it. She worked very actively on many environmental issues too. Rosalind Franklin is, of course, one of the more well-known women scientists across the world. She was a chemist and a DNA researcher. She's the first to demonstrate the basic dimensions of DNA strands, that is the double helical structure of DNA, for those in the audience who know about DNA and who know about to the science, to the audience that is connected with science. Now, Franklin, again, was actively working with James Watson and Crick. And again, here, there is an example where she was not awarded, not included in the Nobel Prize, though she was part of the team which was working on DNA strands. She again died at a very young age due to ovarian cancer. Of course, the Nobel Prize for this research was awarded in 1962, and Nobel Prizes are not awarded posthumously. So she did not even receive a mention. But there were, again, this is Rosalind Franklin is another example of numerous hardships to achieve what she did. This is a scientist, that's Darshan Ranganathan. And as you can see from the poster, from the image, she was a self-made pioneer in organic chemistry. Now, Darshan's story is a little different. She married a professor from her department in the IIT Kharagpur, in IIT Kanpur. And her husband, of course, was a professor there, was made a professor there. Though she is supposed to be very bright and a very able organic chemist, she was not given promotions, and she was not, because she single-handedly funded her research work and her lecture tours through the various fellowships that she received. But just because, her husband was in the same institute, he was preferred for promotion over her. Now, again, here, I think as women, sometimes I wonder if we ourselves, would want it that way. That, again, is again a topic for enough discussion and debate. Now, this is a very happy picture of a theoretical physicist, Vijay Lakshmi, who is, again, who was associated with Madras University. She completed her PhD from there. Of course, she had a very supportive husband. She was detected with stomach cancer, and she's very widely published, and her publications are papers of reference in theoretical physics. So despite her failing health, she not only published her work, but also stood against the administration over issues that junior research scholars faced. So here was assigned a physicist and an activist. So she would help students with their monthly fellowships, contingencies, travel grants, and she worked for establishing safe lab facilities for all, not just for women, of course. So this was an example of a feudalistic setup that she tried to fight during the short lifespan that she had. Here I will just make a mention of these 3 amazing women, all of who we know about. One, of course, first is Sudha Murthy, who is known to us as the chairperson of the Infosys Foundation. She is an engineer by qualification. So she challenged the house of Tatas they had a rule where they would not employ female engineers at their factory. So she was the first to challenge this rule and to start working in the factory. So she created a change at her own level, not to mention the numerous other fora on which she has expressed her revolutionary views. Then there's Aditi Pant. Aditi Pant is the first woman to go on an Antarctica expedition. Now, it is believed that she wasn't naturally selected. She had to actually fight her way to be selected. There were no women who would go on expeditions to Antarctica, and she's an oceanographer. She was, of course, later on honored with the Antarctica Award by the government of India. And after her, every expedition has women who accompanying the team to Antarctica. Now, Kalpana Chawla, of course. Kalpana Chawla, who doesn't know about her, and her birth in the very conservative in a very conservative state like Haryana, and from there, I think to make it to NASA is an example of the most amazing and fulfilling journeys that women in science could think about. Now here we can see that now these short stories that I just narrated to you, they are examples, they are very diverse examples, which I have tried to pick up from all over the world, and women in science, and the kind of challenges that they faced. So there are some common themes which run. There's a common thread which runs through all the lives, through the lives of all these women in science. One, the presence of a very supportive father. I think the presence of a supportive father has been the one common theme that all these women have written about. As I have read about their stories, this is one thing that came to me. Of course, later on, they did find mentors in their areas, but a supportive father laid the foundation for them to dream, for them to imagine, and for them to have a vision. Now, when we talk about the workforce or the careers for women, I think the fact that I told you that, as I mentioned earlier, that just 29% of women are engaged in working in science-related jobs. I think women, it is such a deprived workforce, because wherever you have any workforce or any area where there's diversity in fact brings so much more creativity, so much more balance to any work scenario. So I feel, that at this stage, we have a lot of thinking to do as to how we can encourage our young children, our young students to take up careers in science. We have brought them to the UG level and the PG level. There are girls who are opting for these programs. But after that, translating them into careers is the next challenge that we all are facing. Now, what are the challenges which all these women face? I've just tried to list all of them, and I think these quite cover all those challenges. One, of course, is sexism, which is prevalent across all societies, as you have seen. It is prevalent. Of course, the gender gap, the gender inequalities are low or high, depending. The range, it could vary, but it does exist. We cannot still say that sexism is non-existent. Racism, yes, these people have faced racism. In fact, there are instances, where there are scientists, they speak of some kind of a South Indian lobby, and there are places where you hear of a Bengali lobby, and different kinds of lobbies which are working. And across the world also, you have quite a few racist groups among the science. And of course, in fact, this is very disturbing, because science itself speaks of logical thinking. It is against bigotry, but when these things are there even in science, then the challenge is even bigger. Classism. Last challenge, which I think most of these women faced, are the self-imposed restrictions. I think each one of us, I myself, I think am quite guilty of this, and this is a challenge which we create for ourselves, which are self-imposed. We like to think about ourselves as caregivers, because traditionally man is supposed to be the breadwinner and the woman is supposed to be the caregiver. So we have tried to do the breadwinning, but we also would like to believe that we are needed for the caregiving. So there are so many restrictions, that so many of these restrictions have been brought on us by ourselves. We would rather not attend a conference, but be at home for our families and our children. So these are the numerous challenges that we are facing. Now, what do we need to do? Of course, we know that these problems are there, but what needs to be done? At the institution level, we can create support mechanisms. In fact, NASA, when it was established in 1958, after that, there has been a very, very close-knit women's group within NASA. So this is a wonderful example where within the institution, of course, one is institutional support, wherein you could have women in science. A talent pool could be created. You could, as I've said, you can create pipelines for talent. You can create a talent pool, and then we women in science, wherever there are leadership roles, we can encourage more women to join the workforce. Make gender sensitive spaces. This is very, very, very important, because if we expect women to be in careers and in science-based careers where working hours are much more and very, very erratic schedules, there are groups, this group which is there in NASA, of course, among the members themselves, they offer huge support to each other, because there are times when you have to work in a laboratory, and at times you have to work, for long hours. So at such times, spaces have to be gender sensitive. In fact, many research institutes are now waking up to the need for creches, for having child creches for young mothers. Of course, providing an equal environment to all. So this goes without saying, equal in terms of, you need egalitarian approaches in spaces for people to work. See, the fact that girls are studying, there are many girls in studies related to STEM, shows that the environment is equal in the home areas, at the society level. But somewhere in the workplace, that support needs to be strengthened. And one very important thing, I think, is to glorify women scientists. With so much of influence and impact of media. In fact, once when the movie on that Mangalyaan was made, it is said that after the movie was released, only after that did people know that there were so many women who were part of that ISRO project to Mars, the mission to Mars. So we need to glorify women scientists. We need to give them visibility. There is the Indian Women Scientists Association, where most of you women scientists who are there over here also can, become members of. They have a database in which, all these, and of course, it is another avenue for creating a pipeline. So this is part of that, where you have a database into which many women scientists are enrolled. As I've just said on the slide, we choose the history that we tell. So it's up to us in future, we can, and of course, glorification of women scientists. Here I must mention that in the new education policy, when textbooks will be written, when new study material will be created, the focus on women scientists has to be prominent. It has to be there. So here, whichever areas we are in, wherever we can, let us make this a very visible and a potent kind of mechanism, so that many, many more girls, like and aspire to be women scientists. Now, speaking about, since I am from an undergraduate college, let me share some experiences at the college level, that I have seen in the last 3 decades or so. Well, I, for one, did my PhD. In fact, I registered for my PhD when I was I had my younger daughter was just maybe a year old. So I have 2 daughters, and so of course the challenges were there. But then again, as I said, let us create support systems, for each other. I'll talk about that a little later. But your initiatives in Guru Nanak College, now in my college, as I told you, I have programs in applied sciences as well. We very strongly we advocate participation of undergraduate students in research. Now, our observation in the last few years has been that many girls very naturally get attracted towards research. And they, during the undergraduate programs, many of them have published, they have presented their work at university research festivals and programs. So at that level, we try to inculcate this research bent of mind in them. Then the college students themselves arrange outreach programs for the schools students. There are schools which are around which are in the vicinity. So our college students do that. So these are just steps to encourage them in research. And once these children become, these students at the UG level, they become part of such activities, interest, of course, is generated. And they naturally, they veer towards that. Of course, building scientific temper and all the other spirit of inquiry takes place automatically through all these activities. Now, in our college, we give a fee concession to girl students taking up science. There is very recently, this I must mention, we have recently got a course recognized by the UGC, which is a certificate program for now, which we hope to take to a BVOC program in science communication. Now, this is one program in which we have science students who can, learn about science reporting and science media related to science, making films on science, interviewing scientists. So this is one program that we have introduced. And my gender sensitization cell in the college conducts at least one activity related to science for girl students every year. So this is what we have been trying to do in recent years, to empower these girl students, to give them confidence that yes, science is a good career that they could think of. And in recent years, I must say that the number of girl students going in for PG programs has increased, out of which there are some girls who are thinking now of, taking up research, and of course jobs are important, but they are planning to go in for research programs. So these are the activities which we try to do at the college level. So when we look ahead, what do we need to do? When we look ahead, we need to support each other. I have spoken about this, that we need to create support groups. There are support communities need to be created, even in an institute, even at the university level. I think women scientists could form their own groups where you support each other. And here again, I would like to add that it's not just the workplace support group, even in personal lives. I must insist over here that as we try to balance, as I was talking about the self-imposed restrictions that we tend to put on ourselves, these have to be we have to create these support systems even in our personal lives, whether it's within our families, and or with our mothers and our mothers-in-law, and the families that are around us. These support systems will have to be created. Of course, there is a lot of flexibility in your own understanding that is needed. I always tell my young girls who join the college as well that you have to learn to you have to be very focused, that you have to have a career. Now, to pursue that career, these are the adjustments that I will need to make, which must be made, because eventually it's all about your total well-being as well. Then changing workplaces. So once we have our own support groups, we can change our own workplaces. There will be so much of togetherness, and there are for example, the women's group in my college. Okay, it's not a women in science group; it's a women's group together. So where you can celebrate, you can have activities together, and create that bonding. In fact, the NASA example that I gave you, that you must, after this talk, is whenever you should go and visit the NASA, that website, and you must see the women's group which is there. They do collaborate on various academic and non-academic activities, which of course promote so much of bonding, and that enables people to stick together and creates emotional well-being, because again, emotional well-being is very, very important in the pursuit of any discipline, not just science. And last, of course, trusting your partners. So our partners could be wherever, whether they are our collaborators, whether they are our family members or our partners at home. So we'll have to we are fortunate that at least in these times, we have partners who are who are cooperative, may I put it in inverted commas, in more ways than one. And so we have to just get on with that. So this is again a more philosophical view about how we can look ahead. So it's all about, developing those, developing a mindset, I think, which is open, which is more accepting, and pursuing science, of course, happens along the way. I will just end this with one of my favorite with some of my favorite lines by J.K. Rowling, who I think is such a tremendous author, and I even look at her as a scientist from the kind of writings that she's done through her Harry Potter series. Some failure in life is inevitable. It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default. So let us remember that these failures are our learnings, and if we are clear about what we want to do, there's no stopping us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was very inspiring lecture, and I think that what you said is applicable in all fields other than science also. Now I request all the participants, if they have any questions, please ask. Either you can type it in the chat box, or you can ask by unmuting yourself, but one by one. You can raise your hand from the option, or you can ask in the chat. In the meantime, when they are typing, thinking about the questions, ma'am, I had one question which you sort of answered towards the end when you said that the self-imposed restrictions. Sometimes we are in a situation that it is not easy to have a supportive group, or it takes time because you keep shifting from a place to another, or maybe the environment is such that all in ourselves, how do we overcome this thing? And how do we get out of our restrictions? Because they can be restrictions, but they are also responsibilities.
I can understand. Yes, Sonia, and in fact, I think this is one thing which haunts us, at times, that we feel that people around us should be more adjusting. We feel that we wish that the situations could be, but then I would like to just say one thing, that I believe that once you are committed, once you know that this is what you want to do, there is a lot of hard work which you will have to put in. And as women, I think, the self-imposed restriction is all about conditioning. We have been conditioned to believe, and we have grown up to believe, that the children need us, that the house needs us, that family needs us. And I think if we can balance it with the work that we do, we have to just find maybe ways to kind of balance it. You have to, I think, be more outgoing or be more open to even taking help. At times, we want to, sometimes we are caught in that walk where we also don't wish to ask for help. So let's not do that. Let's ask for help where it's needed. Of course, we will have to also give it whenever the other person needs it. And it's basically an energy, which drives a person. I think that's the thing. So when you are, and if you are committed, let me tell you, people around you will understand your seriousness, will understand how committed you are, will understand how important these things are to you. And I'm sure things eventually will fall in place, because believe me, once you are on this journey, whether it's science or any other journey, when you set out to work, your children, the people around you, initial, of course, challenges will be there, but once you overcome those, there is a lot of respect that you otherwise also earn. And so I will not say that self-imposed restrictions are all wrong. I agree, they are there, and they're there because of the way we have grown up. And I think to change those, and to suddenly because eventually if you're going to be unhappy doing it, I don't I don't understand how worth it's going to be.
Sonia, can I just
Archana,
Hanji, a lovely talk by ma'am, but I just wanted to ask whether chat box has been disabled for us. If so, then people will not be able to write their questions, because I'm trying to, but I can't find my chat box.
wait a
Is
second, I'll just,
that a problem only at my end? Then it's fine. But
ma'am,
if
just check now.
it says anyway, I'll just check. Ma'am, a lovely talk, Dr. Pushpinder. And
Thank you.
It is as if you're voicing our feelings. We feel exactly the same. When a woman scientist talks of a journey, we've had similar experiences. We've been bogged down by similar problems. So it's lovely to hear
Yeah,
another
and
woman.
I think, once the support groups that we talk of, we are, especially women in leadership roles, there's a huge responsibility that lies with us also, so, and it's not just about encouraging women in science per se. Here we're talking about general encouragement also. So where, we have to create these, groups or support groups where, we generally, be with each other. In fact, there are so many women who speak of, the friends that have supported them in their careers, in pursuing their careers. And, when children were young, if you can get a friend to come over. So all those things, I think, will have to be done. Of course, we are fortunate to live in a country where we have families, which are there with us. And so it's just about, being with everybody. And I would certainly not advocate, because I don't see this as a fight. Whenever sometimes, I've heard women speak about, this as some kind of a fight, some kind of a struggle. So I think the very fact that the moment you think about anything as a fight or a struggle, you just, the whole purpose is defeated, because no fight can leave you happy. So it has to be a very synergetic kind of setup that we will have to create. Of course, there are the institutional things which need to be done. Those must be done to encourage women in whichever areas they are.
True, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
If you can see, Dr. Jayaraman has also given very good feedback for your. Can you see the chat, ma'am?
Yeah, I'll just see it. Yeah, I can't see it. Yeah. I'll just check later. Yeah.
Anyway, I was
You can send me a screenshot.
I will send you the chat, ma'am. I'm saving it.
Yeah.
Archana, ma'am, chat is open for everyone. I'll give you another minute. You can type. I was doing some research on the net, and I saw that a latest research has been done by Oxford and Cambridge University, and they say that though it is believed that women love to talk and ask too many questions, but in the recent research, it was shown that 80% men ask 80% more questions than women. So I request my audience to please prove them wrong, and you can ask your questions.
See here, there is, in fact, as I was reading up, I also read somewhere that in one of the research institutes, in fact, even at NASA, I believe in the earlier years, women were forbidden, that they couldn't talk at the workplace because men had these opinions that, women, once they start talking, they start gossiping. But in fact, I have seen that there is a lot of, networking after working hours, which men indulge in. Women can't even do that, isn't it? Yeah. So because once we finish work, I've seen women rush back home, but men have all the time to, chat and meet up over cups of tea. And
True, ma'am. True. Very
yes,
true.
of
We
course.
talk about the same, ma'am. Very true.
Okay.
Yes.
Nishima ma'am wants to ask a question. Nishima ma'am, please go ahead.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the beautiful lecture, ma'am. We could hear so many nice stories about it. Was such an encouraging lecture. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank
Just
you.
wanted to add up, ma'am. Dr. Darshan Ranganathan, she was a brilliant scientist in organic
Yes.
chemistry,
Yes.
and she wanted to join IIT Kanpur during her initial days,
Yeah.
where her husband was already a faculty.
Yes.
So she was denied a faculty position over there.
Mm.
Mostly people say the reason behind this was because her spouse was already there as a faculty, but she was not discouraged by all this, and throughout her career,
Yes.
she did not get a permanent faculty position initially. So she
Ma'am, your voice went away. Nishima ma'am.
Hello, Sonia.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you're back.
So she actually did a wonderful piece of research
Yes.
despite being denied a faculty position. So there are actually, ma'am, you're right, there are various examples to show that despite this gender disparity, women have actually proven that they can actually break the glass ceiling.
Yeah, sure, they can. And I think, along the way, the only point which I usually make, like in February, I was at the Institute of Science in Mumbai. And again, this was about women in science. There were young women research scholars who were there. The point which I try to make at every forum is that let's not lose our femininity to prove something. Let's be the way we are. There's absolutely no need to start behaving and looking like men. Okay. So you need to, let's keep, because we are women in their own right, have we are blessed with so many qualities of I think being emotional is such a big strength. I can see it, when women in leadership roles, I think they perform much better than men at times. Of course, there's no comparison. It's in fact wrong to compare. Hello.
Thank you, Nishima. In fact, I was missing Nishima ma'am. She's usually the host of this meeting.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So Sonia, yeah. So could you hear me? Could you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we heard your answer. And
Okay.
Nishima ma'am is generally the host of this meeting. She's as usual multitasking. And so I was just telling her that good that she was able to join, though she's been in the meeting for some time now.
Yeah. I think this was a very nice. It's a good interaction. We should we must interact more often.
Sure,
And now I'll tell you another thing which crossed my mind. Was that now with this whole idea of virtual platforms. Okay. So, like I just mentioned, women, if you have to go for a conference in physical space, you would rather, be there for family and home. But now with this online communication happening so often, and it's, prevalent everywhere, I think this is one challenge which has already been overcome, so to say.
Yes, ma'am.
There's such a lovely exchange that is happening. I mean, had I in physical space, these exchanges would have their own set of limitations and challenges.
Yes, ma'am. That is there.
Yes.
Okay, I don't see any more questions, so now I invite Professor Archana Bhatnagar
Thank you. Yeah.
and give a vote of thanks, ma'am. Please for your comments.
Yeah.
Archana ma'am, are you there? So ma'am, there are benefits as well as losses of technical
I can understand. I know.
She can't vanish all of a sudden if she's in front of me. Ah. Nishima ma'am, are you there?
Yeah, Sonia, I think there's some problem with Professor Archana's connection. I think she's not there. So, ma'am, can I take this opportunity if you allow me to present the vote of thanks?
Please, please, please,
Our meeting
please.
is not complete without you, ma'am. So please join.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful lecture, for inspiring us and giving us so many interesting stories. And we are actually very inspired listening to you. And you were so calm and composed throughout, and your positivity was reflecting in your face. Thank you, ma'am. And we are so much thankful to the alumni office for providing us this platform, Women in Science, where we can where we invite eminent scientists from around the world to share their experiences. We are thankful to Professor Deepti Gupta, Dean Alumni, who is actually the queen of our movement. And we also thank Professor Archana Bhatnagar and Professor Jagdeep. They are the pillars behind this WISE platform. We are extremely thankful to the Vice Chancellor of this university, Professor Rajkumar, for giving us free hand to carry on with the proceedings of this Women in Science. We are also very thankful to the audience who are present here, who took out time from their busy schedules to come here for the lecture. And we are also thankful to you, actually, ma'am, for being there throughout. And you were so very cooperative throughout our conversations also before this lecture. Thank you so much, ma'am. We do look
Thank you
forward
so
to
much.
hear from you soon.
Thank you so
ma'am.
much.
Thank you, Sonia.
I thank you so much. I thank you all. And here, of course, I would like to one small mention that we have the
Yes, ma'am.
National Center for Science Communicators. So through which we have initiated that UGC recognized program. So it'll be a great idea if at your Punjab University level also you can introduce something like science communication through the National Center for Science Communicators. Maybe we can connect for that. Dipti ma'am will connect through her. Thank you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much.
Probably. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am. Thank you,
Thanks a
Sonia.
lot.
Thank you so much.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
With your permission, now I'm ending the meeting.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes.